Hey everyone! So yeah, my name is Yan. I'm a co-founder and CTO of Chrysalis. We're a coding bootcamp here in Tokyo. Tonight I'll be talking about what JavaScript is. And really, this is just an introduction to coding. It's going to be very gentle, so you're actually not going to do any coding today. It's just getting comfortable with the words, what it is, what it's going to feel like. So let's get started. So by the end of today, you're going to be able to define what programming is. And we're going to create a very simple little program. And we're also going to read a little JavaScript. All right. So who is this workshop for? It's for if you are considering becoming a software engineer or acquiring programming skills. A lot of you also have mentioned, or some in the past, definitely people have mentioned that you work with software engineers or you work in tech, but you're not super familiar with technical things. That's great. You're welcome as well. And then also, if anyone just is like, this is interesting, or if your friend made you join, thanks for coming. It's again, Friday night. You could be doing anything else, but you're here with me. So I'm ultra flattered. All right, so hello, my name is Yan. I'll introduce myself a bit. If any of you could guess where I grew up, it's not a big city, but it's pretty famous. And here's some clues. We're home to these companies. And if you don't know that, you probably know Amazon and you probably know Microsoft. If you don't know, I grew up in the beautiful city of Seattle. Really gorgeous, I miss it a lot. Even though I grew up in such a tech-heavy city, right? I was surrounded by Microsoft. I joke that Microsoft funded my education because they donate so much money to the school system in Seattle. Even though I, was around tech, I never really thought I belonged in tech because all the kids growing up that were interested in computers and things like that, they were all boys, and they were usually like the uncool boys, right? Like they were like the really nerdy boys. And so, I did ballet as a kid. I was a very girly girl in some ways. And so I never thought like that would be something that I could do, because it's like the ugly, uncool boys do that. Like, that's not me, So I never thought I belonged in tech. And so when I went to university, I avoided STEM. Like, I just grew up with this sense of like, I'm not good at this. I shouldn't even try. So in university, I avoided STEM. And after graduation, I did kind of the expected thing that people from my university were supposed to do. I went into finance. And so I was working in trading in finance, which I know is like, might be mathy, but there's not very much math in trading. Nothing too difficult. And I really didn't like finance. I was always thinking about, how do I get out of finance? I'm stuck in this company and I'm too scared to leave because I don't know where to go. I was in my 20s, didn't feel like I had very many skills. And I had all of these app ideas, right? This was back when Uber and Airbnb were getting really big and Facebook was getting really big. And I thought like, oh man, I have these cool app ideas. I have businesses I want to build. But the problem was all of my business ideas required some kind of coding. It was like, oh, I need to make a mobile app. I need to make this. I need to make that. And I didn't know how to do that. So I had a crazy idea, actually. A friend of mine, one of the only software engineers that I knew, And I didn't really know what he did. I just knew that he coded and made these similar things. And he suggested to me, you should just learn this on your own. And honestly, I think he suggested that because he wanted me to stop annoying him, right? Because whenever I had an idea, I would go to him and say like, oh, can you make this for me? I don't have money to pay you, but we'll be really successful together. Like, don't worry, this app idea will make us a lot of money, and I'll pay you when that happens. And so I think he got a little tired of that. So he thought, he told me, why don't you just do it yourself? And I was like, huh, can I really? And he was like, yeah, why not? Like, you can learn how to code. Many people learn how to code. So I had this crazy idea, and I just thought, okay, let me do that. And so it led me on kind of a crazy path. In January of 2014, I made an account on Codecademy, which is an online learning, like coding learning platform website. It's very famous. And this was when they first started, so it was also a very new website. I logged onto it and I had this goal, like, okay, new year, it's January of 2014, I'm gonna learn how to code. I did it a little bit, and I did not log in until the next month. So it was like a month before the next time I logged in. And I tried again, and I was like, man, this is very boring. Learning to code is really boring. So I didn't log in again until May. And I have these emails because they used to email you saying like, congratulations for logging in again. Like, congratulations for continuing this. I didn't actually start fully coding until probably around April or May of 2014. That was when I sat down and I was like, I am going to do this. I'm going to learn how to do this. About a month later, I finally finished my first course. And that was when I started coding a lot more seriously. Every day, after work, on weekends, I really started putting in the time. And that ended up with me quitting my job in August of 2014. And I joined a programming school. And this was in 2014, which was about 6 years ago. And 6 years does not feel like a long time, but back then there were no coding boot camps. They were not very popular. And so I really took a big risk to do one of these courses. I graduated and ended up joining a company in May of 2015. So I was able to essentially change my career in the course of about a year, right? When I first started to really seriously learn. And I went from not knowing the difference between Java and JavaScript to being a professional. Someone was paying me to code in less than a year. So it was this really crazy path that I took. Hold on, I see some things in the chat. Someone asked my first programming language, what was it? It was JavaScript, and I'll be talking about why. Let's go. All right, so in my career switch to becoming a software engineer, there were some things that I kind of realized. When people are talking about software engineers, they're usually just talking about the technical skills. What languages do you know? What frameworks do you know? What can you do? But I learned that as a software engineer, there were a lot of other non-technical things that were almost just as important. So for example, I had to collaborate with team members. I had to communicate why something was difficult and ask a lot of questions. I had to be able to see beyond what other people were looking at and be able to pick apart and bring up potential problems that could arise. I had to interview job applicants, make them feel really like they really wanted to work there. I had to provide code reviews and feedback to other people. And I had to do a lot of researching and learning. So a lot of Googling, a lot of reading, a lot of asking questions. And I never realized that that was such an essential part, an important part of being a software engineer. For the question on that you gave me, Bowden, I'll answer that a little later, okay? So yeah, when I was looking at like what software engineers need, people were just talking about technical skills, but I learned that they also needed communication, autonomy, and empathy. Those were equally just as important in terms of career longevity, right? Is you can be a really skilled, technically skilled software engineer, but if no one likes to work with you, you're not going to get anywhere, right? So for those of you who've been always really kind of afraid of tech or feel like you don't belong or it wasn't for you, I want to say an official welcome to this event. I think you belong here. I believe that you belong here, and I hope we can have a fun time tonight and learn a little bit of programming. So what we will do tonight, you are going to write your first program. We're actually going to skip the fast intro to programming languages because we're a little low on time. But if you have questions about that, I'm happy to answer them later. We're going to read some JavaScript, and then I'll do a Q&A. So some things to know. You won't be writing code tonight. You're just going to be reading it and getting to know it. There will be a little bit of math. Don't worry. It's adding, it's addition. Math used to scare me a lot, and then I got a lot more comfortable with it, but don't worry, there's not going to be any math, any difficult math. We're also covering a lot of very big topics tonight. So if I'm talking about something and you have more questions, that is a good thing. That is a great thing, okay? Questions are a good thing. So we're gonna write our first program. Program is a word that we all use maybe every day, right? Oh, just open that program. Oh, do that in that program, right? It's a word that we use a lot. But how would you describe a program to other people? Let's say someone time traveled from 1750 and now they are in 2020 and you need to explain what a program is. How do you do that? There's some thinking going on in the room. All right. Well, a program is a set of instructions for a computer. Right? Some of you might have said, well, it's like it's got buttons and like it's got colors and there's like words on there and you can do things with them on a computer. That's just a much more complex program, right? At the very basic level, a program is instructions we give to a computer. And something going on in the chat. Cool. All right. So we are going to focus on writing our first program. In the chat, there's going to be a link to a PDF of this page on the left. Asama, you good on that? Add into the chat. All right, so you're going to need to use it for this part of the workshop. So you should see something like that in the link that I just put in the chat. So we're going to be using that for this tonight. The arrow is, you can use your finger. It is to scale, okay? All right, let's go back to this. All right, so we're going to use this for this next bit. So your mission is to reach the goal using only 2 instructions. Move forward 1 space, turn clockwise 90 degrees, so turn right, essentially, okay? You only have these 2 instructions. Can you reach the bottom of the maze with these 2 instructions only? And how many steps do you think it's going to take? So I'm going to give you all 1 minute to think about that and write down your guess. For those of you online, please write it in the chat. How many steps do you think it's going to take to get that arrow from the top part of the maze to the finish, to the goal? We're going to see what the solution looks like. So the solution, you move forward 1 space, move forward another space, and you've got to figure out how to do a turn, right? So that's a turn clockwise, and then you move forward 1 space, but now you need to go down, right? So how do you do that? Well, you can turn, 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 and move forward another space. Okay? Now that's getting really repetitive. We're writing the same instructions over and over again and typing it out, forward, move forward 1 space, move forward 1 space. That's a lot of stuff. So let's make it a little simpler. F is going to be forward, T is going to be turn. So we're going to change our solution to that. F, F, T, F, T, 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 F. Right? That's what it's going to look like. Now it's going to be your turn. So I'm going to give all of you maybe a couple minutes to finish the rest of this solution. We're going to start at the very top. Step 1 is F, F, T, F, T, T, T. Keep going.
T.
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 Number 12.
F.
F.
T.
Okay.
F.
Number 15. Anyone want to help me out?
T.
Okay.
T.
I'm going to just list them out.
T.
What do other people have?
T.
What we got? You have F, F, T, 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 F, T, F, T, T. And then what's after that? Oh, I think there's a lot of echoing. All right. And then what else we have? T, can you read it out loud? Oh, F, and then what do you have? T, 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 F, 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 T, F. Okay? So that's what someone has. How do we know if that's right or wrong? How do we know if it's right or wrong? Yeah, we can just test it, right? So if you don't know what your solution, if it's correct, you'll know it's correct if you follow it and it gives you the correct solution, right? So do you really need me to give you the correct solution? Not really. you can figure out if you have the correct solution, if it works, if you follow the instructions and it works, right? If you're not sure the first time, try it the second. Ask someone else, does this work for you? So that's the first lesson for today. You'll know your code is correct if it gives you the correct answer. What happens if, let's say for instance, this is correct. Oops, sorry, that's correct. What happens if I change one single instruction? Let's say I change this F to this T to an F. What will happen? Everything breaks, right? Changing one little instruction and symbol can make or break your program. It's very, very sensitive, right? One false instruction and you're going the wrong way. You don't turn enough, you don't go forward enough. The rest of the instructions don't work, right? All right, so, let me see. I don't have this. Okay, so a program is a set of instructions for a computer. We just went over a set of instructions that we wrote. Programming is writing a set of instructions for a computer, right? It's how we actually create it. So we use programming languages to write these instructions. We are going to be using JavaScript today to use that to read a little bit of JavaScript and get to know one of our programming languages. So why JavaScript? There's a lot of programming languages out there. There's Java, which is different from JavaScript. I did not know that when I first began. I thought they were the same thing. There's Python, there's Ruby, there's all kinds of things. Why JavaScript? Why are we using it for this workshop for beginners? Well, there's a big reason. There's many reasons, but this is the biggest one. Everyone has a JavaScript engine on their computer that they use every day. Does anyone know what that might be? Something that you use every day that's on your computer. You use JavaScript every day, you just don't know it. It's your browser. So JavaScript is the language of the web browser. And that's what makes it so powerful, because the web browser, Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Internet Explorer, although I hope you don't use Internet Explorer, there's much better stuff out there. It's a bit unsafe. All of them, they read JavaScript. They don't read Ruby, they don't read Python, they read JavaScript. And so that makes it a really powerful language because everyone uses a browser. And there's no replacement for a browser, right? There's nothing so far that's going to be changing the way that we are using browsers. They're going to be around for at least, a few more years. So it also makes it a very stable technology. It's not going to fall in popularity like we see other languages doing. So that's a big reason why we like using JavaScript for beginners. It's also because it's the language of the browser, you don't need to download anything really special. You already have something on your computer that you're familiar with that you can use with JavaScript. So that's another reason why JavaScript is wonderful. It also has a really big community, a really, really big community with a lot of innovation. So our online experience has revolutionized in the past few years because of all the advances of JavaScript. So not only is it a great language for beginners because you don't have to download anything special and scary, not only is it a great language for beginners, there is so much stuff that happens in JavaScript. There's a lot of jobs. You can do a lot of things. Mobile apps you can now write using JavaScript. You can write desktop apps, so apps that you're using on your computer, like what's a desktop app people like to use? Like Slack on your computer. You can create those using JavaScript as well. So it's a really powerful language because it can basically be used in many different places. So we're going to learn some JavaScript today. And remember how with the maze we did just now, we had T and F, those were the instructions. So in JavaScript, there are other symbols and words that JavaScript understands that you need to be able to use. And here's a list of some of them. There's a lot more. Here's a list of some of them. We're going to be using a few of those today and just getting comfortable with those. So online, before we go on, there's going to be a PDF posted in the chat, and we'll be using the first page of it. I'm going to add it in right now. Oh, yay, thank you. Cool. So we'll be using the first page of that for people on site. It looks like this. Oh man, I'm doing did anyone see like the press conference in Japan where they held up the like graph? I'm doing that now. Instead of like a PowerPoint, they just held up a graph. I'm doing that right now. All right, so it looks like this. You can find it in the chat. And we're just going to be using the first page. So yeah, this part of the workshop, there's going to be a lot of guessing. You're going to be doing guessing. Don't worry, guessing is good. Guessing is you trying to figure out what's going on. So don't be afraid to guess. If you're wrong, you're wrong, whatever. Like no one cares. Okay, so first part, we're going to learn about data types and data. And this is really important. Think about the last time you filled out any kind of form online, right? What you're doing is providing data, right? You're giving data you're feeding it into your computer. Your computer is sending it to another computer. And that other computer might send it to others, right? So we're basically taking data from one place to another. And that's really what the internet is. We're just transferring data all over the world, right? So we use programs to do things like create data, change data, move data from one place to another. I'll give you another example, email, right? Email, you are writing some data, which is usually text, right? Sometimes you might add in an image or PDF, but it's usually text. You're writing that data. You send that data to your friends. You read data that comes in. There's also Instagram. You write data, which is pictures and text. You send data. You read data. So there's all like everything is data right now. Everything that we're doing, it generates some kind of data. And we categorize those data in many ways. We will learn the 3 most basic categories of data today. There's a lot more, but in JavaScript, the 3 most basic ones are number, boolean, and string. Okay. Numbers, booleans, and strings. Now for JavaScript, numbers, booleans, and strings, we don't get more specific. With other languages, they sometimes make a distinction between types of numbers, for instance. All right, so these are 3 basic data types. Boolean is the one that is the strangest. Most people, when they're not in tech, they've never come across this word, right? It's a really weird word, Boolean. Boolean is really true or false, and that's it, nothing else. There's no maybe. It's either true or false. A number, I didn't know how to define a number. If you don't know what a number is right now and you're watching this, I just don't know. How are you surviving? But a number is a number. It can be a small number, it can be a big number, a number. That's another data type. And then we have strings. So in JavaScript, strings are any symbols or letters in between either double quotes or single quotes. And these quotes have to match. So if you start a string with a double quote, you cannot end it with a single quote. They have to match. So they have to match each other. And really, you can put anything in between quotes and it will be a string in JavaScript. All right. And you've used these data types whether you know it or not. On a form, when you click on like a checkbox, that's true and false. A number is whenever you're putting in a number, and a string is anytime you're typing your name or your address or anything like that. That's a string. Okay, next building block of JavaScript is a variable. And actually, this is a building block for almost all programming languages, is a variable. Variables are containers that store data. And you can only store one thing in a variable. And when they are created, and the fancy technical word for created a variable is declared. So when you declare a variable, they are given a name. Oh, is everything good? All right, cool. Oh, all right. So with variables, again, they store some kind of data, and we can declare them, right? By the way, I'm covering a lot of technical terminology today as well, right? We're talking about coding, but a big part of learning how to code is just getting used to the language, right? I'm using this word declared. Variable is probably a new word for many of you. You just learned the word Boolean, right? So there's all of these new words, and that's also a big part of learning how to code. It's just getting comfortable with the language. So let's go on. So this, in this, or I guess it would be like somewhere here if you're online, we have a snippet, a little bit of some code. What do you think is the name of the variable that we have here? What do you think is the name of it? Right? There's a part of it that already should look a little bit familiar. We just learned 3 different data types, right? Booleans, numbers, and strings. And we know that this is not a number. There's no numbers here, so we can cancel that out. We know that Booleans are either true or false, and we don't see that written here. But we do see the word engineer written between 2 quotes. So that is a string out in the wild. That's a string. So we know that that's maybe not our variable name. Our variable name is going to be job. Yeah, so let's talk about the different parts of a variable when you're declaring a variable. There's this special keyword var, V-A-R, and that's the keyword that tells JavaScript that you want to create a variable. And by the way, if you're wondering like, oh, I've seen like other ones like let and const, those are newer. We're not going to get into that. We're going to keep it really simple right now and just stick with the original way of creating a variable, which is with this keyword var. okay? We have this keyword, and when the computer, the browser, sees this keyword var, it knows that you want to create a variable. And then we have the name of the variable, right? So we're going to say we want to create a variable called job. This equal sign, the fancy word for it is assignment operator. But what it's really doing is it's saying I want to put something, I want to put whatever is in the right side into the variable that we have declared on the left. And then we have our data, right? And variables store data. So we're saying this is the data we want to store. So, quick review, what is the type of data in job? What are we storing inside a job? What type of data is it? Is it a Boolean? Nope. It's definitely not a number, right? It's a string. And it's a string because there are double quotes around it. Yeah. So let's check out variables a little bit more. The variable name is used later in your code so you can refer to the information that is stored. All right. You can also reassign them to other values. So if you don't, if you want to change your job, which you can change what's stored in that variable. And notice we have some code here where we're using where we are using the variable job and changing what's inside of it. Notice how when we change what is inside of it, we don't need to use var again. So we only use this keyword one time, okay, when we are creating the variable the first time. And so here, what are we doing? At the top, we are creating a variable job, and we're setting it equal to the string engineer. Next line, we change our job to teacher. Next line after that, we change it to entrepreneur. Next line after that, we change it to artist. Okay, so you can change what is in there if you want. And the computer, by the way, is going to read this from the top to the bottom. So at the bottom of this, what do you think the computer thinks is our job? The last line, artist, which is a string, right? So yeah, job at the end of that is going to be artist. All right, so what I want you to do is in your code, this little PDF that you have, I want you to identify the data types that you see in this code. And I also want you to identify all the variables that you have. And now before you begin, when you look at this, you're going to see some things that maybe you don't know, right? So maybe, oh, like what is this while? What is this like curly thing going on? It's okay if you don't know that. You know enough though, with just those things, you know enough to figure out some of what's happening. So just go through and pick out what you do understand. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do this, and then we'll go on. So, it's been about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. All right, so let's check out the different data types. So we know that there's 3 data types. We have Booleans, which are true, false. Do we see the words true or false in here? No, so there's no Booleans that we know of. Do we see any strings, right? Strings are the quotes. We see words, but they don't have quotes around them, right? So they're not strings. So there's no strings. So that leaves us with numbers, and we see numbers everywhere. So if you guessed numbers, you are indeed correct. I just want to check how people online are doing. Yeah, great job, Anna. Yeah, there's two variables that were created, that were declared. Way to go to use that new vocab word. So yeah, the other thing that I wanted you to do is identify all the variables in your code. And we know that when you create a variable, you're using the special word var, right? Special keyword. And we see var getting used 2 times here, right? Just the first top two, var total and var count. Var total is equal to 0 and var count is equal to 1. So yeah, there's 2 variables that get declared. And now that we are talking about our code, it's good to get into the habit of being as specific as possible and also trying to use your technical vocabulary, right? You already know quite a bit. Anna did a great job just now. So there's 2 variables that we are declaring. Total is 1 variable, and that is set to the number 0, right? If we have quote with a 0 inside of it, it's a string. It's very tricky. It's a string. So here we're being really specific. It's a number 0 and not the string 0, right? We have a second variable called count, and that's equal to the number 1, right? So that's great. We have numbers. Everything's a number right now. We didn't see any booleans. We didn't see any strings. And we've counted 2 variables. Any questions so far? All right, there's no one's asking questions. Maybe it's a Friday night, so I'll give you all a pass because you are already doing a great job being here on a Friday night. Yeah, well, it is raining, so maybe that's why you all are here. Nothing to do because it's raining, but I'm glad you're here. Okay, let's go on. There's operators. That's a new word. Again, I know another vocabulary word. Operators. These are symbols that do something to a value. It's a little hard to explain, so let me show you. These are examples of operators, right? You all recognize these, I hope at least. This is math, basic math. There's the plus symbol, there's the minus symbol. There's this equal symbol that you just saw, right? The assignment operator. We're using that with our variables. And then on the right-hand side of this slide, it has a column. We've got less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. All right. So these are symbols that do something, all right? So I hope that makes sense. They do something to some values. So let's go back to that code, that sheet of code. I want you to identify all the operators in your code. All the operators, stuff that you think is doing something. So, yeah, way to go, Anna. You're on fire. Yeah, so as Anna pointed out, she wrote out in the chat some of the operators. So equals, there's some equal signs here. There's like this less than, I should not be doing that. You can all see that. Less than, equal to, there's this plus, there's another equal, an equal, a plus. Yeah, so these are all operators because they do something, okay? All right, now we're gonna talk about expressions. And I remember when I was learning how to code, it was really difficult, I think, describing what an expression was, but I will do my best. Expressions are phrases of code that can be evaluated. They are phrases of code that hold meaning. What does that mean? What am I trying to say? Well, let me show you. They are a combination of variables, data types, and operators. And I promise I have an example. 2 plus 4 is an expression. It's a combination of values and operators, right? And it means something. When we see 2 plus 4, we see 2 plus 4, but we also know that it means 6, right? It evaluates to 6. By the way, the semicolon that you're seeing, that's how we end expressions, and I'll talk about that in a sec. 10 minus 1 is also an expression because, you know, it's values, it's operators, and we know that it evaluates to something. We know that that is 9. Right? So these are examples of expressions. We can evaluate them and get a meaning from that. And these expressions on the left-hand side, they evaluate to a number, right? So we're taking two numbers, we're doing something to them, and we get back another number, all right? We're taking two numbers, doing something to them, and the result is another number. And if you're seeing these semicolons, right, this like dot and a comma underneath, they are called semicolons. And these are just JavaScript's way of ending an expression. I'd like to think of it as kind of a period. Like in English, a period ends a sentence. In JavaScript, a semicolon ends an expression. It's just to let you know, this is the end. There's nothing else. All right, so expressions can evaluate to other data too, right? We just saw expressions that evaluated to numbers, but they can also evaluate to booleans. So here, these evaluate to a boolean, so either true or false. So let's try this out. Is 5 greater than 1? Is that true or false? That's true. I hope you all know this. 5 is greater than 1, okay? How about, is 2 greater than 3? Is that true or false? 2 greater than 3? It's false. It's not greater than 3, right? 3 is bigger than 2. So we're writing here 2 greater than 3. That's a false. So now I want you to identify the expressions that are in your code. And don't worry about while, we will work on that in a sec. So there's quite a few expressions that are in our code, right? It seems like with the adding, some of these are math. We're getting maybe a number back. But the one inside of the parentheses of the while, that is one that's going to give us some kind of a boolean, right? So that's an expression, but instead of giving us a number, it's going to give us a boolean. Just checking the chat. Yeah, exactly, Anna. So yeah, getting comfortable with code is really important because sometimes we look at something like this, right? And we just get very quickly overwhelmed because there's so much that's new to us. So I'm hoping by breaking down the different parts, it feels a lot more accessible and maybe a lot less intimidating. We haven't really covered too much, but already we talked about a lot of things. Data types, right? You learned 3 data types: strings, booleans, and numbers. We also learned about variables. And even with just those 2 bits of knowledge, you were able to figure out a fair amount of the code here. And now we're learning operators and expressions. So I hope that going step by step and trying to see what you know and figure out what's going on, I hope that helps give you an idea of how you should approach coding. Just looking at what you do know and trying to make sense of it. I want to go now on to loops. There's this while word in this code, and you're probably wondering what that is. And this one is really, really tricky. If you have never come across a loop before, we're going to go nice and slow through this. It is very tricky, but don't worry. You're gonna. It's a Friday night. We're going to do this in a really chill way. So loops allow us to repeat code. So let's take a look at this example that I have. It's, oh, sorry, I just knocked the microphone. I hope that wasn't loud. I have a little bit of code. It's a slightly simpler version of the code that you are given, but I'm going to take you through this loop, and I think maybe it'll help you understand how your code is working. Okay, so take a look at this code. All right, I'm going to explain what's going on. So at the top line, var count equals 0, semicolon. We are, you know what that is. We are creating a variable, and that variable stores a number 0. Right. Our loops, we need to start with the keyword for a loop. And there's many keywords in JavaScript, but the one we will use today, the one we will learn today is called while. So again, a keyword is a special word that the language is built with, right? That provides it to you. So we have the while keyword to let the computer know we want to start a while loop. Inside of these parentheses, right, so while is followed by these parentheses, inside of that is an expression, which we just learned, right? And by the way, if you're like, oh man, what's that called again? Don't worry, this is all very new. We want to loop until the expression inside of these parentheses is false. And then there's these squiggly brackets, right? These curly brackets. Inside of the curly brackets is going to be code that we want to run each time we loop. So let's walk through this really slowly and understand how this works, all right? So at the top, we create a variable called count. Count is equal to 0. We use the while keyword to start our loop. Okay, so while, follow the arrow. After the while, it goes to count less than 3. Is count less than 3? Yeah, count right now is 0, right? And 0 is less than 3. That's true. Because it's true, we loop, right? If it's false, we stop looping. So if it's true, let's do a loop. That means we go into the body of our loop, where count is equal to count plus 1. What does that mean? We're in the loop. What is count? We need to find out what count is going to be, right? We don't, maybe when we're looking at this, count is equal to count plus 1. It's a little hard to imagine, but you know that count equal means that you want to replace whatever is in that count variable. So let's figure out what we need to replace it with. So we look at the right-hand side first. Count we know is 0 because we just started. Count is 0. So 0 plus 1 evaluates to 1. So that means we can reassign the count variable to this new value, right? Count was 0. Count plus 1 is 1. And now we change what count is. So count is now 1. Right. Are there any questions so far? I'm also happy to go, like to repeat what I just did. People in the room want me to do that before we go on? Repeat? No? Repeat? No? Okay. All right. So we finished that line. We reached the end of our loop. Well, it's a loop, so we need to figure out if we need to loop again. So we go back and we go to what's in the parentheses and we ask, is count less than 3 now? 1 is less than 3. It is less than 3. It's true. So that means we continue looping. We're in the loop. What is count? We need to find out. Count is currently 1, right? We changed it because of the last loop. Count is currently 1. So now 1 plus 1 is 2. So count is now going to be 2, right? We can use our hands for this. Count is now 2. We assign the 2 to be count, and we reach the end of our body. But it's a loop, so we go back up again and we ask, is this true or false? If it is true, we loop. If it's false, we don't loop. Count is now 2. Is 2 less than 3? True, yeah. So that means we go in, right? We need to figure out, is count less than 3? Yeah. So let's go in. We're in the loop now. What is count? We'll need to find out. Count is currently 2. So 2 plus 1 is going to give us 3. Right. So that means count is now going to be the number 3. All right, so it's a loop. So we got to loop again, right? So now we go back up and we need to figure out, is 3 less than 3, true or false? False, right? 3 is equal to 3, it's not less than. So false, that means we're done with our loop, right? And we finished our code. So that's what a loop does. It's very tricky, right? You have to keep, it's a bit of a mental exercise. You have to keep track of what's going on. So yeah, this is a little review there. Loops allow us to repeat some code. We want to make sure that what's in the parentheses turns to false, because when it turns to false, we stop looping. But while what's in the parentheses is true, we keep running the thing that's in the code. Okay? All right, now, final activity, read the code. Right? And what do you think this code is doing? So in particular, what is total at the end? This is a bit trickier because we now go from 1 variable to 2. So you have to keep track of 2 variables. Okay, I'm gonna get restarted and just explain what's going on with this code and also show you how I would approach this, okay? So we got started in the top with var total is equal to 0. So total is going to be 0, and I'm just going to take note of that. Usually I'm writing this down. I'm very old school. I like to use like paper and pen a lot when I'm coding, sometimes just to jot down notes. So total is equal to 0. Next line over here, the second line, we're creating another variable count and we're setting it equal to the number 1. So I'm just going to write that here too. Count is going to be 1. Okay. And now it's our while, right? The scary while loop. So we know that it's a loop. And so while, and we need to figure out if the thing in the parentheses is true or false. So count less than equal to 10. Our count right now is the number 1. And so 1 is less than equal to 10, true. So that means we go inside of this while, right? Inside of the curly brackets. So inside, we have total equal total plus count. So what do we do here? We want to read what's on the right side first. So right side, total plus count. Our total is 0. Our count is 1, right? So what's 0 plus 1? It's 1, right? So this expression right there is equal to the number 1, or evaluates to the number 1. And so let's take the entire line now. Now we want total, we want to update it, reassign it to whatever this is. And we know total plus count is 1. So total is now going to be 1. All right. I hope everyone can see this. All right. So my total is now 1, and I'm updating it in my notes. Now let's go to the next line. Same sort of deal. Count equals to, I don't know. Let's figure out. Count plus 1. Count right now on here, it's 1. So count plus 1 is 2. And so we want to update what count is going to be. So I'm going to update that to 2. We reached the end of our body, but we're looping. So let's go back all the way up. And let's figure out, is count less than equal to 10? True, loop, false, don't loop. Is it? My count is now 2. 2 is less than 10, so we loop again. All right, we're in here. What's total plus count? That's 3, so we update our total. So now our total is 3. And what's count? Well, we want to update count, and that would be current count plus 1. So that's 3. So we update count to 3. Do I have everyone so far? Any questions? Okay, no questions. All right. We reached the end of our body, but it's a loop, so we go back again. Count less than equal 10. My count is 3. That's true. I go in. I need to update total now. Total is total plus count. Total is 3. Count is 3. So now my new total is 3 plus 3. That is a 6. So that's that line is done. Next line, count equals count plus 1. What's my count? It's 3. 3 plus 1 is 4. I update count to 4. I'm at the end, but it's a loop. I go back. Count less than equal 10. My count is 4, so true. I loop. What's total? Total is 6 and 4 added together. That is a 10. Next line. What is count? I take my count, I add a 1, and I update count. So now count is 5. I reach the end. It's a loop, so I'm doing it again. Count less than equal to 10. Yeah, 5 is still less than 10, so we keep going. Total is equal to total plus count. 10 plus 5 is 15, so that's my new total. And what's count? Count is now a 6, right? Because we just keep adding 1 to a count in every loop. We loop again because it's a loop. 6 is less than 10, so we keep looping. Total is total plus count. So what is 15 plus 6? That is a 21. Count, I increment to 7 now, right? 6 plus 7. End of my loop. Or sorry, not end of my loop, but I reach the bottom of my body and I loop again. 7 is less than 10. True, I'm in my loop. Total is now going to be total plus count. So that's 28. 21 plus 7 is 28. And count is now 8, right? I reach the end. I go again. 8 is less than 10, so I keep going. Less than and equal to 10, so I keep going. What's my new total? It's going to be 36. All right, what's my new count? 9. I loop again. Count less than equal to 10. true because it's a 9 and 9 is less than 10, so that's true. I keep going. Now my total is going to be 36 plus 9, so that's 45, right? My count is now going to be 10. Are you getting excited? We're almost done. Are we done yet, though? Are we done? No, we are not done because 10 less than equal to 10, that's still a true. So we keep going. Total is now going to be 45 plus 10. So that's 55. Our count is now 11. We reach the end. Now we ask, is count less than equal to 10? False, right? First time. Count is 11 and 11 is greater than 10. So we're done with our loop. And now that we are done with our loop, what is total? Total is 55, right? So, yeah, I want to say congratulations. You all just read some code. This is pretty complex, right? You just did a loop and you kept track of 2 variables. And if that was tough, yeah, that was really tough. So if you felt like, man, I need to do that again, my brain was like, not following, that's okay. This is tough. So go again slowly through this code. It's tough stuff, so don't be afraid to do it again. Loops especially are very tricky, so take your time through them. We went over a lot of things today. We went over how you know your code is working correctly. We talked about how one little change in your code can make or break your program. We learned that JavaScript is the language of the browser. We learned about 3 really important data types: strings, numbers, and booleans, right? We learned what variables were. We learned about operators and expressions. And again, if you're like, oh man, what was that? I don't remember. That's okay. It's a Friday night. It's been a long week. And this stuff is pretty hard. Usually it's covered in multiple courses, especially in universities. So don't worry. We learned about while loops, which are really tough, right? So that's a lot of stuff that we covered. It's been about an hour and a half. We started a little late. So, it's been just about an hour and a half. So that's a lot of things that we covered in just an hour and a half. So here are some things. If you liked that, if you thought that that was challenging, but in a fun way, there's a lot of things that you can do after. Continue using your sleuthing skills, right? Because even though you didn't know everything that was in the code, you were able to figure out little by little what was going on. And that's totally fine. In the code PDF, right over here, there is a second page. It's a little bit more difficult. We have something called a function there, all right? Look at that second page and use your sleuthing skills to see if you can figure out what's going on. It's going to take some Googling, but you can do it. There are also so many free resources online, so don't be afraid of trying a few things out until you find something that you like. And if you're like, oh man, I want to learn Ruby, I want to learn Python, I want to learn all of these things, stick with one language. Trust me. It's much easier learning one language really, really well and then learning a second language than just a bunch of languages, but very badly in all, right? So it's much easier when you know one language really well. It's way easier switching to another. And we were all reading today, but coding is a bit harder, all right? Reading code is not too, it's difficult, but coding and being able to come up with it is even harder. So I really encourage all of you to, I hope, go out and try to learn a bit more coding. We also have a lot of events, Blink as well. If you are here and you heard about this through social media, come and check out Blink. Blink is in Motoazabu. It's a co-working space based in Motoazabu/Roppongi. Fun fact, we are right around the corner from them. Code Chrysalis is right around the corner. So if you ever find yourself in Roppongi or Motoazabu, come and hang out. Blink is awesome. They're dog friendly, so you can bring your dog. I bring my dog all the time. So they also have a lot of events. Thank you for posting just now. So Blink just posted a lot of their links. We also, as Code Chrysalis, we have a ton of events as well. You can check them out. Meetup.com/Code Chrysalis. We do a lot of events, so I'm happy to see you all at our future events. And yeah, if you want to learn more about us, our website is pasted in the chat. You can check out all these other things. And I'm happy to answer any questions. But yeah, that was the workshop. Really fast, 1.5 hours. The last few times I've done WTF is JavaScript, it's been actually a 3-hour workshop. So this is immensely slimmed down and calibrated for a Friday night, like less intense Friday night. I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any questions, if you're interested in learning how to code, feel free to email us at hello@codechrysalis.io. Even if you aren't interested in taking one of our courses, we're still really happy to help out. We think that getting more people to learn how to code is good for the world. So yeah, check us out. And thank you so much for joining us today. I hope all of you have a wonderful weekend.